COVID, as everybody who's involved in ministry, had incredible challenges.
Yeah.
Our church looks very different today than it did. There was certainly a pruning that took place, but also fruit, inevitably.
Welcome to Jesus in the Upper Left, where we're talking about gospel multiplication in the Pacific Northwest. Hey, welcome everybody. We are here with Jesus in the Upper Left. My name is Gabe Kolstad from Westside Community Church, and I got my friend Ryan here, and we're going to get to know him a little bit today as we dive in.
Let's do it.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, brother.
All right, Ryan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe a little bit about your family. We'd love to dig into church ministry and the topic at hand today, which is residencies.
Yeah.
But let's start with your family.
Yeah, for sure. I've got a wife and 4 kids, and my wife, Maggie, wonderful woman. She puts up with me every day, so she's obviously a saint. But 4 kids, 2 older boys, 2 younger girls. Love living life. Our biggest hobbies are fishing and hanging out in the outdoors together, which the Pacific Northwest is perfect for that.
Yeah, you're in the right spot.
Yeah, we're in the right spot. So those are definitely the things that motivate me, is spending time with them. And we were just talking off camera, but they're in Montana fishing right now.
Yeah, you
so
must be a tiny bit jealous.
A little bit jealous. So yeah.
But hey, you get to be here.
Right.
This is perfect.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Awesome.
It's perfect, man.
Right on.
So yeah.
So and you guys live in Monmouth, Oregon?
Yep. Little small college town just outside of Salem. Yeah. So great little spot. Little spot.
And how long have you been there?
I've been in Monmouth on and off since about 1998. I went there for college, so I've been there a pretty significant time. I grew up in Bend in Central Oregon. Actually, I was born in Portland. And then moved from Beaverton in 1983 to Sun River.
Really?
Just outside of Bend. So great place to grow up. Loved it, certainly, and then went to college at Western Oregon University, which is the university we've got, and been there pretty much ever since. So
nice.
Yeah.
So how did you end up at the church that you're at? Tell us about your church, and kind of what led to all that.
Yeah, well, I pastor Cultivating Community Church. It's I'll get to that in a second. I actually coached football at the university at Western for 10 years. I was offensive coordinator, coached quarterbacks, and all that kind of stuff for a number of years. Kind of origin story, if you will, on that. I just became really unsatisfied. I felt like the Lord had something more for me, and the shoe just wasn't quite fitting. I was really chasing that coaching ladder pretty hard, and all that comes with that. And I prayed that super dangerous prayer, Lord, take away anything from my life that's not from you and not of you. And He really began a significant stripping away at that time. And don't need to get into too many crazy things, but what came out of that is me leaving college football, and I was spending time with a few area pastors, and kind of unknown to each of them, they began saying to me, "Hey, do you think you're ever supposed to be a pastor? I see you being a leader within the church," things like that. And my obvious response was absolutely not. And so that began a process, and the church I was involved with began asking me to teach once in a while, and so I'd fill in things like that. And then that led to a church plant, which we ended up planting a church, and the Lord blessed that. It grew, and we were bouncing from school gym to school gym, set up and tear down, and all that kind of stuff. Ton of college students, young families, and what we lacked is we were really kind of pioneering in our plant. We didn't have a sending church or anything like that. It was just a collective of people. And so we lacked some systems and structures, that I felt we were really missing to facilitate healthy growth for us. And there was an older church in town that was a little bit on the decline, certainly, had big building facilities, all that kind of thing. And their pastor, though, in some ways became a mentor for me. We'd get together regularly and, hey, how you do this with a leadership team and all that.
Wow.
Yeah, and just a great guy to bounce questions off of, just full of humility, grace, so valued him. And one day he basically said, would we be better together than apart? And so we began about a 10-month process that led to a merge. There's all different kinds of merges, but this was more of a marriage merge.
Okay.
And we formed a new church out of it called Cultivate Community Church. And that was in 2018. And that is where I currently pastor still.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's neat.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into your heart
Yeah.
for residency and all that stuff, but I would imagine there's at least a part of you that goes, you're grateful for his mentorship, and there's something about giving that back, right, to other people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this absolutely ties into residency, because there were a number of older guys in my life that were calling out what I didn't even see in myself, particularly with regard to ministry. And so their wisdom, their insight, when I was in a real life transition stage, was the Lord used in such a pivotal way for me. And so that certainly has formed me in how I look at guys, how I look at leaders within our church, and wanting to call those same things out. And so, that was invaluable to me. Certainly.
That's really great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's dig into the kind of the topic at hand.
Sure.
I mean, you've gone pretty deep into this, right? Like, you spend a lot of your brain power thinking about this particular thing, it seems like to me.
Yeah, no, we certainly have. You know, we're not super deep into our residencies, as far as it feels like we're flying a plane and building the right wing at the same time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but what we have had for a number of years in place is an elder candidacy, and this all kind of got birthed out of COVID. I would say, you know, COVID, as everybody who's involved in ministry, had incredible challenges.
Yeah.
You know, our church looks very different today than it did. There was certainly a pruning that took place, but also fruit, you know, inevitably. But I felt like we were missing something coming out of COVID, even a year after it. And what I realized, what I feel like the Lord put on me, is that I was basically doing institutional maintenance for our church.
Okay.
We were just maintaining our little kingdom and trying the best we could. And we had kind of had this lens looking inward of what was going on, rather than this lens going outward. And so there began a shift for me. You know, I was looking at the guys within our church. Hey, okay, what's our role in this church planning game? Lord, what do you want here? How do we get involved? And I was looking at the people within our body, and we had a kind of one of our elders describes it as a deep bench. We had a deep bench of people could preach, teach, leaders, different things. And so, but not one of them was considering vocational ministry, which I thought was so interesting. Yeah. You know, and I've been thinking about that a lot. My two older boys went to a Christian school, and my one that's a junior had career day like 2 months ago.
Okay.
And like they take this test and all this and that. Not one of the options was ministry. You know, it's just kind of interesting. It's a hard time to be a leader.
It is.
You know, I mean,
hard time to be a leader in a church.
Yeah, hard time to be a leader in a church. You know, you've got outrage culture and division and all kinds of things. So I get that, but we have such a void of leadership. I think I just read that one of the Barna studies said that 15% of pastors are under the age. Only 15% of the pastors are under the age of 40.
Oh, you're kidding me.
Yeah. So that's the kind of leadership gap that we have right now. And so all this kind of combines together to say, hey, and doing some work with North American Mission Board and Send Network, and seeing, hey, we need to get a residency going. I think we have some tools here. And that's when coaching kind of kicked in. I'd always wondered how this background in coaching, I mean, pastoring and coaching have some crossover, certainly.
I'm sure, a ton.
But how would these things cross over? And it led into, you know, when I would get a freshman quarterback in, I say, here he is as a freshman. How do I get him in his fifth year to be he can't tie his shoes right now, but I need him to read coverages and zone blitzes, you know, in a few years. So what's the teaching progression here? And so I think that was invaluable for me to be able to look at some things and line things out that way. And so that helped. And we wanted to form a residency, and we got a lot of help from a number of people that have been doing it longer than us, and we jumped in.
That's great. That's so good. So would you say your vision was a little bit of the response to what you were feeling like the internal pull of the church a little bit, and then the lack of leaders going into the field?
Yeah, I'd say they were mutual. I absolutely. We saw that the Lord wanted more from our church, and a change in culture and posture, even from us, particularly from me as a leader, and then seeing this great need that's out there as well, and those two married perfectly together, and so that's how we're walking it out.
Love it. Love
Yeah.
it. Let's talk a little bit about what struggles you've had to overcome. I mean, it sounds like you started with knowing you had some bench.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that you've quickly discovered that you got to keep refilling that.
Yeah.
And so what obstacles are you finding with that? I mean, what challenges are there in terms of finding leaders that then you can develop to put through this pipeline of residency?
Yeah.
And then what do you think you see in the church in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've always got to be recruiting. And I think the Lord brings people into your body. He doesn't bring people into the church to just be these grain silos that are full. He wants us to open the doors, and so we talk a lot about having every person within our church body has a gifting and has a ministry. They're not a part of a ministry here. They are stakeholders, and so moving those people from spectators, as you know, I'm sure I could probably have a whole podcast on assimilation with you right now, but moving people from spectators to stakeholders, and what is their ministry, what is their calling, and integrating those things into our community groups. What we talk about, the prayer life of the church. We by no means have these things nailed or perfect, but I think there's some health in that area in our church. But we've just got to be constantly. I talk to our community group leaders a lot about who's in your group and what potential do you see in them, and then what's the leadership progression from there? Are you okay? Bring them alongside you, and we can get into kind of mentorship in a little bit, but you've got to be constantly recruiting. You've got to be constantly seeing and praying that the Lord would continue to bring people. You can get people, in our network, you can get people from the South to come up and do internships and do all those kind of things. Those things are there. But I think some of the greatest success, particularly where we live geographically, is, for lack of a better term, homegrown talent.
Yeah.
I mean, it just is, people that, and there are people that are not from Oregon, Washington, or whatever that have had tremendous successes. So that's a broad brushstroke. Certainly there are exceptions, but I think people that grew up in the Northwest and understand a little bit more of the culture here, the Lord uses it great ways.
Yeah.
Great
Well, it's a faster plug-in for sure. And I mean, I think you're scratching an itch that has been starting to surface, I think, in a lot of conversations, which it kind of like you fast forward a little bit and go, how much longer can we just receive the plants and the planters, which again, all so grateful for it. Yeah. And absolutely, I think there's always going to be a place for that, right?
Right.
But if we are not producing our own leaders from within, then it's because something's broken in the system, something's broken in the culture.
Right.
Right. And so what I hear you saying about your church is that you're putting a different lens on the identity of who a person who comes to your church. You're calling them something different than, you're saying you're not allowed to call yourself a spectator.
Yeah.
Your identity is not spectator. Yeah. And so you're trying to shift that at the very beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think that's a gospel culture.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with Ray Ortland. He talks a lot about gospel culture. I'm just a big fan of that, where gospel doctrine forms gospel culture, and what our identity is and who we are, the empowerment of the Spirit in our lives, the gifts, talents, and abilities He's given to every believer for the building up of the body of Christ. And so we're big in that, no doubt. We want everybody involved and equipped. Now we need to grow in how we do that equipping and that discipleship. I think that certainly is an area of growth for us, but we want people knowing that to be true in their life. and particularly the circles that they run in every day, and the people around them. The Lord has put them there for purpose, and so we want them to be very aware of that.
Yeah. Okay, just kind of like to maybe take us on a tiny tangent here. Let's say what you're doing right now goes really, 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 really well for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
What changes in the Northwest?
Oh, goodness. Well, I think I'd significantly like to see, and I know that there's others, a greater collaboration of churches interdenominationally that are moving the needle in the Northwest from not being the place of nuns anymore. So that would ultimately that the gospel would go forth. I mean, and that it would be received. And I think I really believe that we're on a big move of that right now, particularly among Gen Z.
Yeah,
we're seeing it at a college level, and so 20 years from now, I would love to see a whole bunch to be a part of a whole bunch of churches, planting 40 churches, that out of those 40 churches have planted another 40 churches, and there's multiplication taking place that's in a healthy way, like you just said, that's replicating itself, and not needing exterior resources from the South continually, or bodies to kind of just keep piling in here. But something's taking place in this place in Portland that is significant. It's a significant move of God to the point where it's only what He could do. That'd be the dream.
That's pretty great. Okay, I'm in.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah. When you think about what residency leads to, I mean, I know there's the whole process. I'd love to hear about that. But how do you think right now about, if somebody's in your residency program, how do you decide with them what's the church plant going to look like that you start? Or, you know what I'm saying? Because there's so many different forms, right? How do you feel about forms in terms of micro church, house church, disciple-making movement, big box church, prevailing model, whatever. How do you approach that personally?
Yeah, well, at the end of our plant, the end of our residency, there's kind of this 3 to 4 month window of evaluation stage.
Okay.
And so our leadership team kind of sits down and spends a lot of time with the resident, and we spend a lot of time talking with each other what might be the best fit for this individual. And it's not always a plant right away. Sometimes it's other roles in ministry maybe, and sometimes they can get hired on at church and be an associate or some of that thing. The main thrust and the heart certainly is planting. But to plant a church, we want to see someone, we could talk about qualities a little bit. It's got a little bit entrepreneurial spirit, certainly. Part of the residency, they've got to start a group.
Okay, so giving them like an assignment.
They've got to gather a crowd.
Takes those skills.
And that's the beauty of residency, where you get practical opportunities right away. You know what I mean? And so as far as the church, you somewhat replicate the kind of church that you are. And that can be good and bad. If you've got some great healthy systems, you want those to be birthed out into this next church. But I think maybe one of the fears in planting is that the ascending church has to have a lot of humility, because they're giving up. We're saying, here's resources, here's financial resources, here's commitment of time resources, here's some of our best leaders and some of our best people, and we're giving all that away. And so that takes gospel humility to do that. And it's kind of like I read a while back, and I think this is perfect. It's like parenting. A church plant is like parenting an adult child. You need to give them freedom to navigate whatever it is that the context of their community, right? They need to understand the context and what form of church is going to be the most significant impact there. And so that can take a number of different shapes and number of different forms. But as the adult parent, like you cheer them on, you hope and pray for health, and you support them, and you're there when it goes bad. That's like, so there's that freedom that they kind of have to explore those things. So to pinpoint a a style of church, I really think it depends on the context of where that plant is going to be. I'm in a smaller town. Is it a small rural town? Is it a university town? Is it in the suburbs? Is it in the heart of a city? And so you have to understand some of those contexts, because each of those, as you know, comes with a lot of different challenges. So, yeah.
One of the things I'd love to hear is if you could just unpack a little bit the structure of your residency. I think that's probably what a lot of our listeners are going to want to know. Is like, okay, but tell me, like, what is it? Like, how do you build it? What do you cover? How long does it last?
Yeah.
How do you get in? How do you get out? Some of that stuff.
No, yeah, certainly. That's a great question. And I think when we launched ours, that has been my main question as well. And so I've reached out to a number of people and kind of there's a wide spectrum of who or how that gets played out and how that can do from a 2-year program or residency to a year residency to a number of different things. I'll speak to our residency, and it is by no means the best. I'm sure there's better out there. In fact, I know there is. So if anybody hears this and wants better info on that, I can point you in the right direction. But
cool.
I would definitely say ours is a year.
Okay.
We cover 9 competencies that Send Network's kind of lined out, and we spend a month on each of those competencies. And so we address the heart, relationships, calling, theology, preaching and teaching, missions, the nations, church structure, and just practical leadership development as well. And so we spend a month in those, and throughout that we have preaching labs where they're prepping and getting sermons ready. And so how it looks, just even in a given month for us, we'll get together on the first Sunday of a month after church, and we'll meet for a few hours and intro the month, essentially, the main topic. And we have different reading resources that we'll work through, usually at least 2 books and 2 or 3 different articles. And then there's usually some type of write-up.
So 2 books a month.
2 books a month.
Yeah, and some other reading.
And
then some other work.
And some other work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so...
So it's significant.
It's significant, but here's where it is interesting. So we don't pay our residences. Sorry, as any of our residences listening, right. you guys deserve it. But and a lot of places do. They pay a half-time salary. So we want to get to that, But we're the size of our church and the things we have right now. That's a more limited resource right now. So we do want to make it. While it sounds like a lot, we do want to make it pretty accessible for these guys that are working full-time jobs and things like that. And so I'll get together individually with each guy, at least probably a couple times a month, a touch point as well, or a few of them at a time. And then we'll have a closing meeting at the end of the month as well. And that's really what that looks like. And in between there is the most important stuff, the practical development, I love the model of, kind of discipleship where I do, you watch, we talk, right? And then it builds. I do, you help, we talk.
Yep.
Then you do, I help, we talk. And then you do, I watch, we talk. And then the most important phase is, you do, someone else watches, and we talk, So we're big on that. And so creating opportunities for these guys to step into things and cut their teeth, essentially. That's the beauty of a residency, is because you have that availability right now to put what you're learning into practice.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so you're covering a lot of skills. What does it require in your situation now?
Yeah.
What's required to get into the residency?
Yeah, well, there's an interview process, an application process. And so we evaluate those. We go through those with, an initial launch, especially when we know a number of guys. And I think for people that might be listening, the best place to start is just in your church. I think every church has people in their church right now that the Lord's calling to help be leaders. And a pastor told me a long time ago that I need to be finding my replacement continually. And I think that's really wise. Because it helps frame this mindset of I need to be helping develop. My role as a pastor is to steward the gifts of the body. And so if I'm not helping develop those type of leaders, I need to be doing that. I need to be stewarding them. And so application process, interview process, and those are really the biggest things. And
are we talking? You need to have a bachelor's degree? No. So there's no educational.
There's
requirement?
no educational requirement for us. No, there's not.
All right. Yeah. And then one of the things I also am wondering is this something that, so you're now involving people from other churches as well? Is that right?
Not yet.
Okay.
No,
but that's the intent?
That's the intent. Yeah,
okay.
we'll definitely it'll be opened up.
Okay. And so, well, here's a question. Why?
Why involve others?
Yeah.
Well, I think so from a perspective of if we're doing something healthy and that's good, I feel like the Lord would bring others to be involved in that. And what a benefit that would be for our body, because the residents have to be involved in our church body. They have to be members at our church and involved. And so what a gift it is for the people of our church to glean wisdom and insight and the fruit that comes from these individuals who are putting their skills and their giftings to work. That's going to benefit our church body. And I think it shows too that it's not a one-man show.
Yeah.
I'm not the only one with a gift, and our church knows very well I'm not the only one with gifts. I have my many shortfalls, but I think that there's a real beauty for the body to see that kind of working. It really helps foster this missional mindset where you see in Acts, Paul goes to a place, he evangelizes, he's sharing the gospel, and then he disciples, he teaches there, and then he appoints leaders there, the church planting part, and then he moves on.
And it's like he's 6 weeks and he's out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's fast.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so that helps model that we
does.
get to be a part of, when people start, when Lord willing, outsiders come in, we get to be a part of that, of their journey, and get to be see where they go.
Yeah. Now the collaborative thing that you mentioned, which that's part of it, right?
Yeah.
Is allowing other churches to send a potential leader through a residency program that's going to be solid, and that they're excited that they get to do that. Have you thought about, or have you already started bringing in resources from other church, teaching, mentoring, coaching? How does that work? What's that collaboration look like?
Yeah, no, certainly. So, we're a smaller church. We have some strengths, certainly, but we also have some shortfalls. And so it's a great benefit to reach out to other churches and build a network of resources, essentially. We'll bring in a couple pastors that are very strong in teaching and preaching, and come in and have them meet with our residents. We've got a church that potentially wants to help partner in a housing eventually for residents. So that would be a huge blessing.
That could open up some new doors.
That could open up some new doors, certainly. So I think building a network, building that out is super key, because we don't have all the answers, and we certainly don't have all the wisdom. So let's bring in some of the better minds that do and share that with our leaders.
Yeah. That's awesome. I hope that continues to move that direction. That's great. When the residents are in the program, how do they get mentoring as a part of their journey to multiplication?
Yeah. So the mentorship piece is they get one-on-one time with me, certainly.
So you're making yourself available to each one-on-one.
Yeah, I am making myself available. And so I think here's a benefit. Our church is smaller. Okay. I have the luxury to do that.
Okay.
I don't think that's always the case. And so I think you can come up with, for example, we have 2 retired pastors that go to our church as well. Nice. And what fantastic resources. As schedule gets bigger or things grow, I can absolutely see maybe even handing the lead element of this off, the leading of the residency off to someone else. And so that's a big piece in determining residency practically. Who's going to run it?
Yeah.
Who can run it legitimately, time-wise, because it is a commitment. So you want somebody that is going to be able to have that kind of mentorship mindset going into that growth mindset, if you will, for these individuals. And so that's a big piece. But right now, I spend a lot of time. I spend time with the guys.
Yeah.
Certainly. It's one of my. In fact, I would say this is probably the most significant thing I would point to in ministry that I've done to date. I feel that pretty deeply. Pretty deeply. So
that's awesome. And you probably not only love it, but you probably got the gift mix that really assists you in that.
Yeah.
Coming from the coaching days and all.
Yeah. No, I definitely feel like that's exactly right. I feel like there's a collaboration in my heart and mind of just this meeting point that fits right, and I'm super excited about that. So yeah, it definitely lights me up.
Yeah, and I think that's a really key that I am just listening to you observing is that it's getting the right people on the bus and in the right seats.
That's exactly right.
And you're definitely very well fit for this, and I think that one of the reasons I'm sure it's working is that you're made for this.
Well,
so that's cool.
It definitely feels it's fun that the Lord does that kind of stuff, isn't it? Where the things that excite you and the things that just light you up, and He just brings that along in ways I would have never imagined this. I would have never pictured this how it is, and so it is very exciting. It's a gift, no doubt.
But you've just given permission to everybody who's listening that's not wired like that. To hand it to somebody who is, which is a great freedom.
Yeah.
And, and just to be honest, in our church, we have something similar that I don't run. Partly because that's not my inner wiring is not as much,
For sure.
And so, but I love it and I know it's important and I helped start it, but it was time,
Yeah. And that's the beauty
important.
of a body, right?
Yeah.
Because the Lord brings the people you need to run the things He wants out of His church.
Yeah.
And so that's a perfect thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good.
Okay. What happens when it doesn't go well?
Good question. Well, I think there's two ways that don't go well. There are two categories, if you will. There's doesn't go well for an individual or doesn't go well because of the system. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it doesn't go well for an individual. I think you have to come back to one thing in our interview process is we very much talk about a calling. Calling's really big because I think we've all known, individuals that want to get into ministry for not always the right reasons, that there's a platform or there's opportunity and there's a way you're viewed. And so when things get tough, that they'll crumble. You know what I mean? And ministry is hard and not easy, no doubt. And so calling really is everything because when it is hard, there is, I think Spurgeon called it a grit, there's a real grit to individuals. And so, we have, I'm thinking of one guy right now, he's felt a calling and he's been so firm in it, but he feels like he lacks so many giftings that he just wavers. He just has wavered, and this turns out to be a good story because he's had so much doubt, so much anxiety, particularly around public speaking.
Okay.
Big issues with public speaking, a lot of fear around that, just kind of locks up, feels like he's going to pass out, all that kind of stuff. But he loves the church. He loves the body. He wants to see it do well. And so there's been a lot of work had to be done to push through. So sometimes it takes a lot of work. I mean, that's just the reality of helping a resident out. And sometimes it's not going to work out. It's not going to be the right fit. We do everything you can to avoid that. But it's a learning opportunity. I mean, that's just what it's got to be. It doesn't change the calling of us as a church. Now, the other piece there is we have to evaluate, okay, did we miss something in this evaluation process with an individual? Did we miss something? Is there something in our structure of how we're doing this that helped enable that failure or that shortfall, or is there something that's not preparing these individuals the best that we can? And so, those are really, you just have to look at those as opportunities. They're going to happen. The worst thing we could do in ministry is not try.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing we could do. And so,
Love that philosophy.
yeah. So how do we not operate out of a fear of failure, but take what I'd call calculated risks, and where else would you want to be with the Lord, I guess? I mean, if you're super confident and 100% sure that what you're going to do would work, you don't really need him, So I think it's a pretty good place to be where, Lord, I don't know how this is going to work out. We're trying, we're putting things in place, but we're really going to need you to do this, So when there's failure, certainly a lot of evaluation,
What do you do relationally in those situations?
With the individual?
Yeah.
I think it depends on it depends on how things don't work out. Is there sin, or is it a church discipline type of issue? Has there been something to disqualify? Well, then the heart would just be to mentor and to win back over. I think the biggest thing in a church context is even if there's a removal from a residency program, there's not a removal of the individual from the body of Christ. You know what I mean? I think that's really important to recognize. And so the heart would be to restore an individual. And so then, you kind of get into maybe church discipline or things like that if there's been an instance of impropriety or something like that. But as far as one thing we have built in is that stage at the end where there's an evaluation, because there could be individuals that finish that, but maybe a plant is not the best fit for them yet. And so what could be a next phase? What could be a next opportunity for them to still grow in ministry and have opportunity within the church with their gifts and abilities, but it might not just be this yet. You know? So having that, when you finish the program, it's not a rubber stamp.
Sure.
Let's go full assessment now and hit the gas for you.
Yeah.
So it's still an evaluation phase. So,
okay.
Yeah.
And it sounds like your focus, obviously, for your residency program at your church is church planting.
Yeah.
And you're aware that sometimes there's an exception and somebody's going to, looking for maybe a different lane in vocational ministry or something like that. And you're okay with that.
Yeah, we are okay with that. We definitely want to, we think anybody that would add to the group, certainly, and bring, just be a good fit. We welcome in, and someone wants to serve practically in ministry within a church setting. We want them involved if that's what their heart is. If they're hungry, they're humble, right? They have those characteristics we're looking for, but they want to serve. Yeah, we want them in. But the main thrust would be to plant vocational ministry. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a story of somebody that you're just super proud of that's come through your residency and you just, you like what they did, you like what they're doing now?
Yeah, I think I would piggyback. Really, the biggest story is a young guy I just told you about a little bit, just gripped with fear. But here's where I talked about the calling earlier. He was so burdened for ministry that even when he tried to back out of ministry, he couldn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's a beauty in that kind of burden. Like if we're being honest, I think pastorally, there are times when we're like, there's another vocation that'd be a lot easier right now. I mean, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. This would be a lot easier road, weekends off, all that kind of stuff. We have those low moments, but this guy, he pressed through, and his teaching began to grow. His public speaking ability was rough, no doubt. But he kept working, and I'm so glad. Actually, there's a guy at our church that has a recording of my first sermon ever from our plant.
Oh boy!
And man, he holds that over me all the time. So I am really, really hoping that doesn't come out. But this individual, he kept pressing in, and it was really not too long ago, probably about 6 months ago, he preached one of the best sermons I've ever heard.
Whoa!
And it's been this progression over time. And I'm sitting there watching a line of our body for him at the end of a service, certainly congratulating him but people asking him to pray for them. And there was just this complete flip of someone who was insecure in their calling, who was not confident, to having confidence now in what the Lord's doing in his life, and this ability from when he felt like he was going to pass out in public speaking to delivering an absolutely beautiful sermon. And so that's a win. And he will be pastoring a church in the next year.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, for sure. So
that's awesome.
Super exciting. So, yeah.
Well, from my perspective, I'm really excited that there's a church that's not too far away from where I'm at, and that's a part of the Oregon territory.
Right.
I'm very excited that you're doing the work you're doing. I know you're also connected pretty broadly, and it sounds like there's some great opportunity for this work to expand. So that I'm also excited about.
Yeah, for sure.
But thank you for all the hard work you put into this, and
I appreciate that.
We're watching, learning.
Yeah.
And how can people get a hold of you if they want to connect?
Yeah, I'll get my email up and contact information, all that kind of stuff. So whatever's easiest for
Great,
put it in there.
Okay, we'll put it in the description.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah.
All right. Thanks again for being here, and can't wait to hear what happens next.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Jesus in the Upper Left. We want to ask you a quick favor. Would you please subscribe so you don't miss a single episode, and share with those that are in your life that might benefit from the content. Hit the notifications button, rate and review, of course, and then head on over to upperleftshow.com where you can find bonus content, opportunities to connect with those around the city that are doing similar work as you, resources to help you, and just a way to connect to the community. We hope to see you again next time.